welcome to the X-22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 457, and today's date is September 2nd, 2014, and the title of this episode is The 60-Day Countdown Begins. Will this lead to the false flag event? And what I mean by this is that it seems that Obama informed Congress that he is bombing Iraq, and this is in accordance with the Wars Powers Act, and it gives him 60 days to carry this out. Now, of course, he was bombing in August, but he decided to tell them right now. So here we are with this 60-day time period, and after this, he needs to get approval from Congress, or there needs to be some type of an event where he can say the United States was attacked, and we can go ahead and go full blast into war. Now, this time frame brings us to October, November, around this area, because we have 30 days in September, 30 days in October, and we're right in this area. Now, we understand the Fed is going to be out of the stimulus package deal that they've been doing, and they're going to, of course, use back channels to keep this going, to continually use the bond purchasing in another way. But with everyone else looking at this and not understanding what's going on, they will believe that the Fed is no longer stimulating the economy. And we also see that different flashpoints are starting to really heat up in all different areas. We're looking at the Middle East. We see many countries now falling. The governments are on their last leg, or they are out, and the central bankers are looking at this going, okay, we need to ramp this up. We need to accelerate it. We need this event now, and we can see that they're really pushing this. We've just had word that Sotloff was beheaded. Of course, it's very, very difficult to find the video. I have two pictures posted on the site. These pictures were from Zero Hedge, from site, and all of a sudden they were off of Zero Hedge. I still have them, and again, it looks a little fishy to me because the body sizes are completely different just looking at these pictures. But of course, yesterday I said that the Islamic State will no longer put out these videos, and I noticed that the pictures that they've shown, these still shots, they're far away, plus they're cropped in a certain way where you can't really see anything else except what they want you to see. So they're being very, very careful right now to make sure they don't mess up like they used to, and it seems like they're not producing the video, and they're just pretty much telling you that there's a video, the man was beheaded. Just please believe us. That's all we want you to do. And again, around the country, it doesn't matter if people see the video or not. All they need to do is continually build up the story. And the story is we have this terrorist group in Iraq spreading into Syria. It's getting out of control. They're continually killing Americans. And eventually, we will need to go in there. When I say we, it's United States central bankers, go in there and get the Islamic State. Now, of course, Obama would have to go to Congress, and they would have to vote on this. We see polls right now being taken from YouGov, and it's showing that, yes, the American people are all for war going into Syria. Of course, last year, the same exact time period, the American people were not for this whatsoever. Now, I've taken a poll on the X22report.com site, and the results are completely opposite. It looks like it's 84% now that are saying absolutely not, and 16% saying yes, let's go into Syria. So I see on many other sites they're getting the same readings as me, and it looks like the governmental sites are getting the ones saying yes, it looks like the American people are all for it. So we can see right now, when they look at these poll numbers, they are convinced, they are ready to go, they're ready to push this event forward, and to really get the forces there in full armament and everything else, they will need some type of an event because they realize this economy is falling apart. It is collapsing, and they need something to pretty much mask all of it and blame it on another group or country. Now, right now, yesterday I reported that experts are out there saying that, yes, the Islamic State could hit the power grid infrastructure, physical attacks. We also have reports of Russia hitting the financial institutions, saying that JP Morgan and other banks were hit. And yes, one big hit could bring down the financial system in the U.S. and really cripple the economy. So you can see they're just continually building this up nonstop. And while they're doing all this, they're going to keep the recovery illusion alive. And what we're seeing is that the United States has come out with their manufacturing numbers, and we have manufacturing numbers all across the world here, well, the private Western Central Bank world. And what we're seeing is that the rest of the world, their manufacturing is way, way down. 26 countries have reported, and about 15 of those are weakening, 2 remain unchanged, and 9 see a very little bit of improvement. But here in the United States, what we're seeing is they're saying we are in full recovery. The ISM manufacturing has risen almost without hesitation for the 7th month from January, collapsing to new 3-year highs, printing at a dramatic 59, the biggest beat in over a year, just shy of the recovery cycle high in 2011. Now, at the same time, what they're doing is they're trying to keep the stock market all pumped up and high. So, again, all eyes are on the stock market because for most of the people around the country, they do believe if the stock market is going up, the S&P is going up, the Nasdaq's going up, that means the economy is okay. So this is why they're continually doing this. And of course, when they see gold go down, they say, the economy must be good, the dollar must be strong. So everything the government is telling us is correct and true. And of course, what they don't realize is that gold is manipulated, the stock market's manipulated, all these numbers are manipulated to fit a certain story. So when the event occurs, people say, wow, the government, the central bank, they had us in a recovery. This other group nation destroyed our economy. We have to go after them. And this is exactly what they're setting up at this point in time. Now, it looks like China and Russia, they're combining. They're creating energy deals right now. Russia's oil major Rosneft, Gazprom, and Novatek have all struck major deals with Chinese partners, which provide long-term financial stability for the companies which are at risk of Western sanctions and decreased demand in Europe. And this is coming from Moody's. Gazprom broke ground on the Power of Siberia pipeline, which, when complete in 2018, will be the largest fuel network. So we can see right now China, Russia, the other BRIC nations, they're all kind of separating themselves from the West because they realize what is happening. And they actually really understand that these central bankers will not stop and they'll continue on this path to war. And they do realize this. And this is why they're all getting together and saying, you know what? We need to get out of the dollar. We need to have our own energy. We have to have our own food. We cannot depend on the West right now, because when we go to war, we have to be self-sufficient, and this is exactly what they're doing. And the war drums are getting louder and louder. Now, in Britain, it seems that Prime Minister David Cameron would like to take away the passports of those people who he believes is basically leaving the country, going to fight for the Islamic State or Syria or any other terrorist group, and he wants to take away the passport before they leave so they cannot go fight in these groups. And here in the United States, Brown applauded, this is Senator Brown applauded Prime Minister David Cameron's announcement yesterday that the British government would seek a change in its law to extend the right of the government to remove passports from terrorists and deny them the right to return to the UK. Brown called on Congress to immediately pass legislation that would strip U.S. nationals who engage in terrorism of their American citizenship. Now, the question is, they keep telling us that they don't know, who's out there, who's coming back, who these people are. They're running around, they're untraceable, but they want to pass legislation to find these people that they can't keep track of. It makes no sense whatsoever. They're just pushing out words, using lip service. They're not really thinking all of this through and understanding what is really going on here. Okay, let's move on to Ebola now. And it looks like Ebola is threatening food security in West Africa. The world's worst Ebola epidemic has put harvests at risk and sent food prices soaring in West Africa. Restrictions on people's movements and the establishment of quarantine zones to contain the spread of the fever has led to panic buying, food shortages, and price hikes in countries ill-prepared to absorb the shock. Now, we understand that in West Africa, most of these nations, Sierra Leone, Gabon, the Congo, Nigeria, Guinea. They all had recent oil discoveries. They're very, very big. A lot of Chinese companies, Russian companies, Italian companies are in making the claims. They're right off the coast, and this is where Ebola is breaking out. We also understand the economies are failing there. We understand that China has been pumping in billions of dollars into many of these countries, building up their infrastructure. Now businessmen and other companies are afraid to go to these countries, so they are leaving. So they have forced them out, and this disease, this virus, is spreading. And of course, they're keeping the push of the agenda and scaring people that yes, this is going to go to 20,000 infected, 100,000 infected. And Obama was out there today with a message to the West Africans saying that you cannot get this from breathing. You can only get it if you touch, if you're not clean. And he was just giving lip service to the West African people. But what I see happening here is sooner or later he will be on the television saying that we are sending U.S. troops to many of these areas because their systems have broken down. Business people have left, the governments can't handle it, and the U.S. needs to step in and place troops in each one of these countries. Now, to prepare for all of this, and of course there's going to be fighting once this happens because these countries do not want the U.S. there, but they'll force themselves in there. Right now, the U.S. is setting up a second drone base in Niger, and they are pretty much having this because they have one in Djibouti, they have one here, and they are making sure they have the ability to control the whole entire region. After months of negotiations, the government of Niger, a landlocked West African nation, has authorized the U.S. military to fly unarmed drones in this area. The previously undisclosed decision gives the Pentagon another surveillance hub, its second in Niger and third in the region, to track Islamist fighters who have destabilized parts of North and West Africa. Of course, they're using the terrorist handbook, playbook to say, yes, there are terrorists in here. This is why we're setting up drones, because we need to find those people. Now, you have to remember, in Ukraine and in the Middle East, once the countries have been taken over, anyone who disagrees with the country, with the puppet regime that they put into place, they call them terrorists. In Ukraine, the southeastern people were automatically deemed terrorists, so they created the anti-terrorist force. In the Middle East, we have the tribes rising up in Yemen, Iraq, Libya, and in these areas. And of course, they're called Al-Qaeda, but they are the tribes of the country. They want their countries back. And of course, by calling them terrorists or Al-Qaeda, Congress allows the U.S. to use drones against these people. They're doing the same thing in Africa. Once the president makes the announcement that they need to send forces down into the area to maintain control, all of a sudden you will see huge amount of drone strikes in the area because there will be factions in there saying we want this U.S. government puppet regime out of there. We don't want you in our country, and of course they will be deemed terrorists. Now in Nigeria, they are trying to wiggle their way in there. They have been trying for a very long time. We see outbreaks are occurring in Nigeria at this time, and it's starting to really look like they are really pushing the agenda to pretty much take over the whole West African and then move into the east side of Africa. And of course, if you remember back in a couple of reports, China had a think tank, and they said that the United States was going to destabilize this entire area and try to move into this area and pretty much contain Africa. And we see them doing this in the Pacific. We see them doing this in Africa right now. We see them in pretty much having false flag events all throughout the Middle East right now, and we see what's happening in Ukraine. So there's a lot going on, and it's amazing. During the beginning of August, when I made that report that we're going to see many events while Congress is on vacation, we have seen so many things happen so far. It is completely unbelievable. Now, as we know, the Dutch team that was pretty much investigating the MH17 They haven't released any type of report. Russia's asking for it. They're not releasing the voice recordings at all. And now the Dutch Safety Board spokesman says the preliminary report will shed certain light on the cause of the tragedy, but many questions still remain unanswered. They're looking to get something out by the end of this week, early next week. We'll have to see what they produce. It's not going to be what anyone thinks it's going to be. It's going to be something that's really like high level, doesn't give any details, doesn't really say who did it or anything like that, and everyone's going to look at it and say, okay, we got nothing from this. Where's the real report? And of course, the real report is confidential because the Netherlands, Ukraine, Australia, United States, all got together and said, we'll keep all this information confidential. If you like to send this information out and have it published, any country could veto it, and it has to remain confidential. So right now, I'm not expecting too much from this preliminary report that they produce at this time. Now, Russia is out there, and they're calling on the U.S. to use their influence on Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called on the U.S. to push Kiev into giving up its military campaign against pro-Russia rebels in the east and negotiate a political compromise. He called on Washington to pressure Ukraine into reaching a deal during Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko's planned visit to the U.S. later this month. It is very important that the U.S. uses its influence and capabilities to give the signals necessary to transition to the political process from attempts to solve the situation by force. Now, what they're saying is that the southeastern people are winning the battle. The Kiev forces are being pushed back further and further. They're losing. Rioting and protesting is continuing in Ukraine. People do not want to fight in this war. The economy is collapsing, and they're saying, listen, before we go any further here and the pro-Russian people pretty much decimate the entire government and you lose everything, let's talk about peace. Let's talk about what's going on here, and we'll see what the U.S. has to say about this. Now, the EU is making a plan to make sure that when we go to this war, World War III, that they still have gas reserves. So they're coming up with Plan B right now. The European Union may ban the reselling of gas and limit industrial use as part of a contingency plan to create a stockpile for next winter in case Russia stops their gas supplies. To save, Europe would no longer resell any LNG gas imported from the Middle East and North Africa. Often it sells it abroad instead on the domestic market. So right now they are taking precautions. They realize where all this is headed. Everyone is very nervous about war. The central bankers are on this path. They will not stop. They realize the collapse is coming, and most of the nation's government officials, they're all in on this. They realize where this is headed, and this is definitely being pushed as hard as possibly can. The IMF right now is looking at the Ukraine situation with the civil war going on, and they're saying that the $17 billion is not going to help the economy whatsoever in Ukraine. The Ukrainian economy is completely collapsing. This is not going to be enough. And the IMF said its worst-case scenario would see Ukraine requiring an additional $19 billion in funding by the end of 2015. So basically what they're doing is the same thing they did with Greece, Cyprus, France. They're just piling on more and more debt, keeping the war going, keeping it going. And who does it benefit? The bankers. That is it, because their product is debt. They make income off the interest of that debt, and they're going to continually do this, and they will do it nonstop. Now, Ukraine is out there. They wanted to join NATO, but since they're in this civil war, it seems like they really can't go fully into NATO. But Ukraine says that they're expecting to have the status of U.S. non-NATO ally, and it would be in an intermediate stage in Ukraine's drive towards full-fledged membership into NATO. And what the non-NATO ally is a designation given by the United States government to close allies who have strategic working relationships with the U.S. Armed Forces but are not members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is NATO. The non-NATO ally status was first created in 1989. Nations joining the NATO status are eligible for the following. They would get defense-related initiatives, supplies of certain types of weapons, joint participation in space projects, and some of the major non-NATO allies are Australia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and a number of other states. So we can see this is exactly what they wanted to happen. They beefed up the propaganda about Russia invading, and we know this is complete propaganda. There is no invasion whatsoever. They're using it to bring in more military assets, to get more aid, and actually to get NATO forces, U.S. forces, all in this area to help out in this whole entire situation to reconquer Ukraine, and this is exactly what is going on here. Now, NATO spokeswoman said Monday that she was unaware of possible presence of NATO officers in southern Ukrainian city of Mariupol, but the Donetsk People's Republic representative said that yes, a group of 6 NATO officers has been blocked in the town of Mariupol, and they are inside Ukraine. So it seems like the opposite is actually happening, where the U.S. and NATO are calling out that Russia has invaded. It seems like NATO and the U.S. have invaded Ukraine and helping out in the situation there. And like I said, whatever the government officials say or central bankers say, it's pretty much always the opposite. And we see this time and time again. Now, because of what's happening with NATO and all this propaganda going on there, and Russia seeing all these military assets being moved, hidden in caves, they are pretty much adjusting their military doctrine to pretty much combat NATO expansion right now. Moscow is to review its military doctrine, a move that is caused by expansion of NATO in Eastern Europe. And NATO's actions show that both the U.S. and NATO are trying to escalate a deterioration of relations with Russia. We're open to cooperation in the Arctic, where we're looking to have a dialogue with NATO and the United States. And this is coming from a Russian spokesperson. And what we're seeing right now is that Russia and the Western Central Bank countries are all making a play towards the Arctic. And right now, the major national interest of Russia in this region will be the use of the Arctic as a resource base capable of providing the needs of Russia in hydrocarbon riches, water, bio resources, and other strategic material for solving social economic tasks. There are other countries that are up in the Arctic region are Canada, Denmark, Norway, Russia, and the U.S. So, well, Russia is also there. And what we're seeing right now is they're all making a play for this region because there's a lot of resources up there. It's also a strategic location for attacking the other country with missiles and things like that, and they're all making a play for this region right now. Now, it looks like U.S. troops are heading towards Ukraine right now. Preparations are underway near Ukraine's western border for a joint military exercise this month with more than 1,000 troops from the United States and its allies. Now, every time we hear something about training, moving military assets, 1,000 troops, it always seems that these troops and assets always stay in this area. We saw it happen in Jordan when the United States was planning to go into Syria. Then we saw another training exercise in 2014, and pretty much everything just stayed there. And we can see this happening in the Eastern Europe with all the drills and everything that's going on. But this whole entire U.S. troop force that is heading towards Ukraine, their big focus is peacekeeping. It will include command post drills, patrolling, and dealing with improvised explosive devices. So this is peacekeeping, and they want to make sure they have everything in place because we know what's going on here. We understand that all military assets are being positioned into place for war. Now, I just mentioned that Russia is in the Arctic, and so is the United States, and it looks like the United States is looking towards Canada to contribute to the missile defense program should it choose to join after a decade spent on the sidelines. Several conversations with high-ranking U.S. military officers point to a common desire: multi-purpose sensors in Canada's Arctic that would sniff out a wider range of potential threats than just intercontinental ballistic missiles. Since the Arctic horizon is a high potential route for incoming missiles, so-called long-range discrimination radar, which tracks objects with greater precision than the current system, would make sense in this area. So the United States is looking towards Canada, looking to put up sensors in this area. We see all these countries making the play and pushing towards the Arctic. Now, out in Yemen, what we're seeing there is the tribes there are rising up. Now, we're seeing this in Libya, we're seeing it in Lebanon, we're seeing it in Yemen, and yes, we're seeing it in Iraq. There is a mixture of Islamic State, which is controlled by the U.S. government, UK, Israel, and other Arab nations. And then we actually have the tribes rising up in Iraq, and that's where the bombing is happening. It's really not on the Islamic State. But in Yemen, it looks like Yemen's president has dismissed the pretty much the government inside. He dismissed the whole cabinet, but the tribes there are not satisfied with this. They want a completely new government in Yemen at this time. And the tribes came out and said, "We affirm that what was issued by the government committee is a position that represents it, and we do not agree to it. Our position is still that we, by the Yemeni people who have gone out in blessed popular revolution to demand their legitimate and just rights. They want them to step down. Get out. You are no longer our government." Now, it looks like, again, I've said this before, the government of Libya has fallen. The puppet regime has lost complete control. The tribes, the people, have control of Libya. Ministry and state offices in Tripoli have been seized by armed militias. The loss of control comes just days after the country's interim government resigned. The Libyan government reported in a statement that it has lost control of state offices in Tripoli to armed militias. So we can see right now Libya has fallen. Things are starting to pretty much become much worse for the central bankers. They're losing control of the Middle East. They realize this, they understand this, and this was the purpose of sending down the Islamic State into Iraq. They needed enough chaos, they needed an event, they needed a terrorist group where they could blame everything on and have them do the work for the U.S. government. And before I put up, there's two different scenarios. It looks like eventually when the event occurs, the U.S. will fly bombers into the region and try to help out. But really what they're doing, they are not helping. They're going to be pushing the Islamic State further and further towards Assad. Now, what's very interesting about this is that NATO right now is ready to back Jordan against the Islamic State. Now, this is where they trained. They trained in Jordan at secret bases. The U.S. supplied them with all of these weapons, and now NATO is ready to back Jordan. Jordan has its intelligence services deploying their full range of tools to counter the threat. Well, they already know what the threat is because this was all created there. This is an illusion, and they're masking what's really going on there. This is a complete covert mission to remove Assad. And Russia right now is, again, warning the United States, do not come into Syria. And Kerry is out there, and he is saying that airstrikes alone won't defeat the enemy. The opposition in Syria, even the moderate opposition, is fighting the Assad regime, which is also fighting ISIS. So we need the nations of the world to support forces fighting the Syrian army while it is fighting ISIS. So they want to bring in more countries to really make a run into Syria and remove Assad. So we can see exactly what's going on here. They are creating this whole entire mission to bring in all the other countries, Russia, the UK, NATO, all into this area, France, to help push their agenda forward, continually bomb in this area, have the Islamic State move closer and closer to Assad, and eventually they will take him out. And what's very interesting about this, Russia is out there and they have stated, we know what you are up to. And they've stated, U.S. policy with regard to Syria could be interpreted as an attempt to invade the country and overthrow President Assad under the pretext of fighting terrorism. Right now, a situation is emerging where the actions of America could be interpreted in a way that suggests that they are trying to fight a genie that they have let out of a bottle. Let me rephrase this. They are trying to use the real threat of terrorism in Syria, Iraq, and the entire Middle East to invade Syria. So Russia is coming out point blank. We know exactly what your plan is. But at this point, I don't think the central bankers, U.S. government, and all the other private Western central banks care at this time. All they want to do is push their agenda forward. They want to have the false flag event, and they want to make sure that they start a war, because it doesn't matter if they know or don't know at this time, because if they can get a war started, the players are always the same, and that's going to include China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Russia, and other BRIC nations. Now, since Obama has informed Congress of airstrikes under the War Powers Act, he formally notified Congress today at the beginning of airstrikes against the Iraqi town of Armeli, as required under the War Powers Act. Now, of course, the United States central bankers have been bombing since mid-August, but they just decided to do this now. Now, they have 60 days. The President is allowed only to launch such unapproved operations in the case of a national emergency, which would be difficult case to make in Iraq, and also he can only continue the war for 60 days without congressional authorization for the use of military force. The 60-day clock really should have been ticking, back in August, but it's starting right now. Now, if you take this, we move into October, November, and this is when the Fed said they'll be out of the stimulus. They're making a push for a recovery. These are all indicators. This is not a crystal ball. Anything could happen. We saw it happen back in 2013 of August when the United States government central bankers didn't have the support of Congress or the people, and they realized they needed a way out, and this is why they said, if Assad removes his chemical weapons, we'd be fine with that. Russia picked it up and brokered a deal of Assad removing the chemical weapons, but here we are 1 year later, the exact time period, and they're still doing the same exact plan, get rid of Assad. So we can see right now that they are really pushing this, and they're trying to get into this region. Now, we have this 60 days, and this, with all the indicators that are coming in, it seems like we might have something happen very, very big within these 60 days. Now, anything could happen during this period, but everything right now is really pointing to that at this time. Now, of course, they're bringing in North Korea. We saw the propaganda of the 3 individuals that are detained in North Korea, and now they're bringing in cyber attacks from North Korea, which is just amazing. The timing of all this is absolutely perfect. North Korea using foreign bases to launch cyber attacks against the United States and other countries. North Korea doesn't actually do that much from North Korea, relying instead of cells planted in other parts of the world, particularly China, and even inside sworn enemy South Korea, where they bounce it off servers. So they brought China into this also. As the report notes, North Korea Hacking Unit 121, accused of hacking the U.S. and South Korea, has a base in North Korea but depends on named command posts based in just hotels that are just over the border in China. So you can see what they're doing right now. They're bringing in the other player, North Korea, because everyone has to realize, yes, this is the other enemy. So we have China, we have Russia, we have North Korea, we have Syria, we have Iran, and other nations around the world. But these are the major players right now, and they want everyone to realize and understand that, yes, these are the major people that we will be in war with. Now, it looks like the Obama administration is unable to locate 6,000 foreign nationals who have entered the United States on student visas, raising concerns about the government's ability to track potential terrorist suspects who may already be in the country. Well, this is kind of ridiculous because let's think about this. The Obama administration opened the borders up, took the guards, the border patrols completely off the border, let anyone who wanted to come in, come in. And they're worrying about 6,000 foreign nationals who've entered the United States with student visas and they can't locate them. But they're not worrying about all those people coming over the border who have no student visas, actually have nothing. They're just coming over and sneaking into the country. So does this make any sense, or is this for propaganda purposes? That's exactly what this is. It is propaganda to convince you that there are many people running around the country, and they're very concerned because, you know, our strict policies and our pat downs and our security is not working. Well, this is all fake, false, and phony as usual because the borders are wide open. So this is just pure propaganda to convince everyone that these people are just running around. And this went on to say that these people just disappeared. This is coming from Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn. They get the visas, and then we can't track them, which, again, is ridiculous because the borders are wide open, and nobody is worried about that. That should be a huge, huge worry, and they should say, you know what, we better close the borders. We better bring guards down there. But you don't hear anything like that because that is not on their agenda. Their agenda is to convince you that the security is not working, and these people do have visas. We've done our checks, but we need more of it to make sure that these people aren't roaming around the country and in different areas getting ready to do something bad. And we can see that all this in the airports, all of this security is absolutely meaningless. It's fear factor. That's all it is. Now, we saw the well, I haven't seen the video yet. I've been searching for it, and I only seen 2 still shots, actually 3 still shots right now, of Sotloff, his beheading. Well, it doesn't really show it. It just shows the after and before, and the body types. When I look at these 2 photos, I don't. This was posted on Zero Hedge, and when I went back to look, the still shots were completely gone, but I still have them. It actually looks like 2 different people, 2 different body types. The beheading picture, the bodies, it's cropped in a certain way so you can't really see much. You only see the head on top of the body, but the body size is completely different from the person who's being beheaded. And if anyone has the link to the actual video, or they most likely are probably not, they don't want it out there. There might be some anomalies in it, and this is why yesterday when I was reporting that they're not going to release any more videos, because people look at the video, they take a look, they see no blood, they see no cuts, they see 2 different knives, they see freckles on one face and not the other, and it completely falls apart. And I see why they don't want to release videos anymore, because the false flag, their event that they're creating right here is not working for them, and people are finding out that it is fake. And we can see right now they're continually keeping the propaganda going. They don't really care at this point, because most of Americans do believe, most likely, that the Islamic State is this scary terrorist group, that they are beheading the heads of these reporters. And we see a lot of anomalies. We saw that the sister of Foley looks almost exactly like the sister or one of the people in Sandy Hook shooting at that time. And a lot of things really are starting to now blend together, and they're using the same people, and it's really starting to fall apart. But if we don't get every single person realizing this, it will not work. And this is why it has to spread to as many people as we possibly can. I know there's a lot of alternative media out there spreading this around, trying to get it out there. I know it's very difficult and hard to talk to other people. And what they're going to do is, once this event occurs, we need to say, you know what? We know it was you. We know it was the central bankers. We understand this. We are not going to war for you. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.